welcome. This will be the first one we've had in a while that actually will work, and everybody showed up, and author will be present, and hopefully we'll have no Zoom snafus. I just sent the email out momentarily, a few minutes ago, actually, for our call on October 1st with the author who's going to talk about his book on the 1950 Philadelphia Whiz Kids, which is appropriate since Philadelphia did make the postseason. The Orioles did not, so that's why I'm wearing my Cubs hat right now, because you have to go with somebody who's actually in the postseason, since we looked awful today against the Yankees. I hope everybody's doing good. Welcome to fall. MLB postseason is upon us. We will start scheduling our calls and stuff for next year. We'll keep the same format as we have the past 2 years. First Wednesday of the month, and then the last Sunday of the month for 9 out of the 12 months of the year. For those of you who are local to Baltimore, our SABR Day will be January 19th at the Peabody Heights Brewery, as in the past. That is Martin Luther King Day, so we're fortunate to get the place when it's closed and we don't get charged. So more on speakers and stuff like that, as we get closer. Tom, I forget where you are, down in the Carolinas, maybe?
I'm in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. That's right. That's right.
Tom's spoken to us before, probably on Zoom, and I know also he's been at the Babe Ruth Museum in the past. Here's one of his previous publications, The Called Shot.
Right.
Excellent. I forget how many years old this is.
2020, so 5 years.
5 years. So that's been on my shelf as I get a lot of Babe Ruth type books
Right.
for myself, or somebody gives them to me, because I like to keep up on that stuff. So you are a co-host if you have any presentations. I don't think I have any more administrative announcements at this point. If anybody who wants to write for the Baltimore Chop newsletter, those submissions are due this week, September 30th, October 1st. So, but other than that, I will let Tom take it over. And if you have any questions, just throw them in the chat, everybody. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for the introduction. I'm sorry I look like a ghost. I've never been able to sort of figure out how to do these Zooms at night in my little study here. So I don't really look quite this white and pale in real life. But yeah, I just thought I would go through the book, talk about what got me interested in writing about the 1926 season, and kind of related to the culture at large, because I tried in this book, as I did in The Called Shot, to set the baseball season in the country and in the society that existed at that time. My interest in writing about 1926 really came out of the research that I did and the writing I did for The Called Shot, because that book was about the Yankees and the Cubs in the 1932 season, 1932 World Series, where Babe Ruth, of course, hit his famous called shot. Now, that year in 1932, Rogers Hornsby was the manager of the Cubs up until August, when he got fired in the middle of a pennant race. So Hornsby and Ruth didn't actually compete against each other in the 1932 season, but they did in the 1926 season. And so in doing the research for the 1932 book, I was just very interested and kind of mesmerized by the parallel histories of Hornsby and Ruth. And as I looked more into 1926, I also saw that was a kind of a pivotal year, I thought, especially for the Yankee franchise, but also for the Cardinals franchise. The Yankees had only won one World Series up to that point. The Cardinals had never been in a World Series before 1926. So the story really begins the year before. It begins in 1925, when the Yankees slumped. The Yankees finished 7th in 1925. Babe Ruth had his worst career year. He hit 290, 25 home runs, 66 runs batted in, a very, very poor performance compared to what he had done the first 5 years he was in New York. He was overweight. He was out of shape. He was suffering from some kind of stomach ailment that had him hospitalized early in the season, and then he clashed with his manager, Miller Huggins, and he got suspended. It was just a terrible year for Babe Ruth in 1925, and sports writers writing about that season after it ended figured that Ruth was over. He was 31 years old. They didn't think that he would ever be the player that he was again. By contrast, the St. Louis Cardinals in 1925 had started out very poorly. They won 13 of their first 38 games. They were 13-25 when they switched managers. They switched from Branch Rickey to Rogers Hornsby, and Hornsby at that time was not only their best player, but then he became the 29-year-old player manager of the Cardinals, and he got them kind of revved up. He got them all the way up into the first division. So the Cardinals were on the up. They were coming into 1926 confident that they could be a first division team, and the Yankees went into spring training in 1926 without much support from the press or people who thought that they knew baseball. The Yankees, however, in 26 made a whole bunch of roster changes. Um, they have they had a second-year player playing center field, Earl Combs, a second-year first baseman named Lou Gehrig. They had Pat Collins as a new catcher, and they had rookies at shortstop and second base, Mark Koenig and Tony Lazzeri, and they didn't know what was going to go on, what was going to happen with their right fielder, Babe Ruth, because he had had such a poor season in 1925. In fact, during spring training, Miller Huggins told the press that he thought that his team might be good enough to get into the first division, but he didn't really have any illusions that they would be a pennant contender. So that's the way things started. That's the way the season started for both the Yankees and the Cardinals. And once they got out of spring training, things developed that were pretty much opposite to what the forecasters had predicted. The Cardinals did not start well. By the middle of May, a month into the season, they were in seventh place out of 8 teams. The Yankees started exactly as nobody thought they would, by immediately taking charge in the American League pennant race. So we had these sort of two stories going on. The Yankees, seeming to be dominant once again. The Cardinals struggling, although Hornsby at that point early in the season did have some hope, he thought, for his team. He said that what he needed to make his Cardinals competitive was another outfielder and another starting pitcher. He had a fairly good pitching staff of Billy Sherrill and Jesse Haynes, a left-hander and a right-hander. But he wanted another right-handed starting pitcher, and he wanted an outfielder who could hit. And in June, the Cardinals made 2 trades, one on June 14th, one on June 22nd. On the 14th, they traded Heine Mueller to the Giants and got Billy Southworth in return. And Southworth went on to have the best year of his career in 1926. But probably the bigger acquisition, the key acquisition, who stays a big part of the story of 1926, is that the Cardinals were able to pick up Grover Cleveland Alexander, who was a 39-year-old pitcher pitching for the Cubs, and the Cubs were ready to get rid of him. They were kind of in a rebuilding mode in 1926, and the manager, Joe McCarthy, didn't really think that Alexander had much left to contribute. Alexander was known to be an alcoholic. He had clashes with McCarthy. He liked to do things his way. He was a little bit hard, I think, for McCarthy to manage. So McCarthy was willing to trade Alexander to the Cardinals, which delighted Rogers Hornsby, who of course had played against and batted against Alexander during his entire career. Hornsby really believed in Alexander, and Alexander became the pitcher in the second half of that season that really carried the Cardinals to the pennant. And then when we get to talk about the World Series, we'll see that Alexander also was the pitching hero of the 1926 World Series. But I'll save that part till we get further along in the season. So we're now in June. Yankees taking control in the American League. The Cardinals moving up from 7th place to 4th place, still trailing the Pirates and the Cincinnati Reds, and the Cubs actually were doing pretty well that year too, unexpectedly. And then there's another event that happens, and this event happened away from the ball field, but is a really important book in a really important story in terms of baseball in 1926, and it's a big part of the book. In June of 1926, a former pitcher named Dutch Leonard, who lived in California, had been out of baseball for almost 2 years, decided that he wanted to come to Chicago and tell his story to the American League president, Ban Johnson. And the story he had to tell implicated several very famous ball players, Ty Cobb and Tris Speaker and Smokey Joe Wood. He indicated, this is Leonard's story. Leonard's allegation is that the 4 of them were involved in betting on a game in 1919 that was played in Detroit a week before the end of the 1919 season. So placing it historically, that's a week before the Black Sox scandal. The Black Sox fixed games in the World Series, the White Sox against the Reds in 1919. Anyway, Leonard's claims, this is Leonard's allegation, that after the next to last game of the series between the Indians and the Tigers, that Tris Speaker, who was the player manager for the Indians, gathered together Smokey Joe Wood, Ty Cobb, and Leonard and said, "We're going to lose tomorrow. We might as well bet on the game." Leonard claims that everybody put up between $1,000 and $2,000, which was a really significant amount, 10 to 20% of their annual salary, basically, to bet on a game that the Tigers would win and the Indians would lose. They gave the money to a guy named Fred West, who was an attendant at the ballpark in Detroit, and he tried to place the bets in Detroit. Then he couldn't find a bookie to take the money, so he went to Chicago and bet some of the money in Chicago. They won the bet because the Tigers won the game, and then they both, 2 of them, Smokey Joe Wood and Ty Cobb, wrote letters to Dutch Leonard, telling him what had happened, sending him a check for his part of the winnings. And Leonard held on to these letters. This was the evidence that he had, that he wanted to show to Ban Johnson about the game that he claimed they had fixed. Now, let me just back up a little bit and tell you what happened in the game. The Tigers were supposed to win, the Indians were supposed to lose, and that's what happened. The score of the game was 9-5. There were 31 hits in the game. The most distinctive thing about the game, however, was that it was played in 66 minutes. Now, apparently, the Indians had nothing to play for. They were already clinched 2nd place. The Tigers did have something to play for because they were trying to get into 3rd place, which would give them some small amount of the World Series share. So in the game, Speaker and Cobb, who were the respective managers, also played in the game. Cobb's team, who was supposed to win, Cobb only went 1 for 4. He didn't really contribute anything to his team winning. Speaker was on the team that was supposed to lose. He had 3 hits, including 2 triples. So there's no evidence really to support Leonard's notion that Cobb or Speaker did anything to affect the outcome of the game. So Leonard took the letters to Chicago, showed them to Ban Johnson, said that if he did not get $20,000 from the league, he would sell the letters to the newspapers and implicate Speaker and Cobb in this scheme to defraud baseball, basically, by having bet on a fixed game. And I will note that at that time, players did bet on games, and that was not considered unethical. You could even bet against your own team. And of course, Speaker and Smokey Joe Wood were both members of the Cleveland Indians, so they were placing bets that their team would lose, even though Speaker played very well in the game. So Van Johnson actually, it was hush money, basically. He agreed to pay Dutch Leonard $20,000 and kept the letters. He also kept it secret until September, when he finally told the other American League presidents what he had done, and they worked out a plan on how they were going to address this with Cobb and Speaker down the road. So I insert that here because chronologically, the meeting between Leonard and Van Johnson occurred in June. The season, of course, continued. Um, in August, the pennant race got a little bit tighter. The Cardinals were kind of making a move. They were still trailing the Cincinnati Reds. They didn't actually catch the Reds until about middle of September. The Yankees continued to dominate the American League. Ruth was having a really good year. The Yankees did have a good pitching staff. They had Herb Pennock and Wade Hoyt, Bob Sharkey, Urban Shocker, all very competent pitchers, and they were getting good production from their rookies, Mark Koenig, and especially Tony Lazzeri. So we get to September, and the pennant races are tightening up a little bit. The Yankees had a long road trip, and the Cleveland Indians got within 3 games of them. But the Yankees wind up winning the American League pennant, and the Cardinals win the National League pennant sort of at the end, setting up an October World Series. Now, in the book, I take a little break here at this point to talk about what was going on in another professional baseball league, which was the Negro League, because there was quite a good pennant race in 1926 in the Negro Leagues as well. There was a pennant race in the Eastern Colored League, and that was won by the Atlantic City Giants. And there was a split season in the Negro National League. The Kansas City Monarchs won the first half, and then the Chicago American Giants won the second half. So you sort of have this parallel universe, which I found really fascinating as something to deal with and to talk about in terms of 1926, because the level of play in the Negro Leagues at that time was very, very high level of play. Many of the players who participated on those teams that I've just mentioned eventually have been voted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Probably the most significant one who participated and who became the big star, the pitching star of the 1926 Colored World Series, was a pitcher named Willie Foster, who was the younger half-brother of Rube Foster, who was a historic figure in black baseball up until the middle of the 1920s. And I also think 1926 is a kind of a pivotal year when we talk about black baseball, because that's the year that Rube Foster, who had been the visionary and the architect of the Negro Leagues, really establishing them as a league in 1920, he kind of left the scene. He suffered from a mental illness. He was hospitalized, but his much younger half-brother, Willie Foster, in 1926 became the pitching star of that Colored World Series. And the other thing that is significant about 1926 in black baseball is that that was the first year professionally that Satchel Paige was involved in black baseball. He pitched for a Chattanooga team in the black minor leagues. So it's kind of a pivotal point in black baseball also at that point, with Paige becoming the face of black baseball going into the 30s, and then the 40s. And of course, there were other stars who emerged, Josh Gibson, etc., other fairly well-known black players. So now we have the setup for the 1926 World Series. First 2 games were held in New York in Yankee Stadium. The Yankees won the first game. They pitched Herb Pennock against Billy Sherrill, and the Yankees won 2-1. And I might note with Sherdell, he was an interesting player to research. Um, he was a relatively slight fellow, left-hander. Um, it was said that he had only two pitches. One was a slow ball, and one was a slower ball. So he relied completely on off-speed pitches. Had a very good season for the Cardinals and a good career with the Cardinals. He was matched up against Herb Pennock in that first game and in Yankee Stadium, and the Yankees took that by a score of 2-1. Very close, well played game, very well pitched game by Herb Pennock. Game two in Yankee Stadium, Hornsby had to decide who he was going to pitch. He had Jesse Haynes, who had been their best right-handed pitcher all year. He also had a young pitcher named Flint Rem, and he had a pitcher named Vic Keane, who had actually had one of his best seasons there. But Hornsby decided to pitch in this pretty crucial game. You know, he didn't want to go down 2-0 in terms of a 7-game series. He wanted to pitch his best pitcher, so he pitched Grover Cleveland Alexander, this 39-year-old pitcher with a history of alcoholism and a pitcher who was supposedly over the hill. And Alexander was outstanding. He won the game, pitched a complete game. Cardinals won 6-2, evened the series at one game apiece. The series then shifted back to Chicago, or I'm sorry, back to St. Louis for Game 3. And Jesse Haynes was the pitcher who started for the Cardinals in Game 3. And Haynes, I might note, is not well known as a pitcher, but he pitched his whole career with the Cardinals and has the second most career wins of any pitcher who ever pitched for the Cardinals. The only pitcher with more wins in a Cardinal uniform was Bob Gibson. So Haynes was a big star, a big, very commanding pitcher with a fastball and a knuckleball. And he really relied on the knuckleball as a pitch to kind of get him out of jams. And he pitched very well in that game. There was a rain delay, and the rain delay in that Game 3 sets up one of the great Babe Ruth stories, which I'll insert here. During the rain delay, policemen came to the two dugouts, the dugout of the Cardinals and the dugout of the Yankees, with a ball, asking players to sign the ball so that it could be sent back to New Jersey, where there was a young boy named Johnny Sylvester, who was a baseball fan and had been hospitalized with a head injury of some kind. So several of the Cardinal players signed the ball, and then it was taken over to the Yankee dugout. And this is while the rain is coming down and the players are waiting to get back to the game. Several Yankee players signed the ball, and then it went to Babe Ruth, and Babe Ruth signed the ball and added a message. He said that he was going to hit a home run the next day for Johnny Sylvester. And many of you, if you're Yankee fans, know that story, and you know that Ruth in the next game actually fulfilled that promise. So the rain stopped. The game continued. The Yankees did not score. Jesse Haynes shut them out. It was a 4-0 win for the Cardinals. That moved them ahead in the series 2-1. The next day, Game 4 was played, and finally the Yankee bats came alive. Ruth hit not one home run, which was for Johnny Sylvester. He hit 3 home runs that day, first player to hit 3 home runs in a World Series game, and the Yankees won 10-5. Game 5 in St. Louis also went to the Yankees. This one was by the score of 3-2. Another closely pitched game. I'm sorry, this was won by the Yankees 3-2, and it was again a closely pitched game by Herb Pennock and Willie Sherdell. So at this point, the Yankees needed to win one more game. The series was going back to Yankee Stadium, and where that sets us up for Game 6 of the World Series. And the pitcher that Hornsby chooses to pitch in Game 6 is once again Grover Cleveland Alexander, pitching on just a few days rest. And once again, Alexander comes through and pitches a complete game. Now, one thing that happened during that game, even though the Cardinals won that relatively easily, I think the score was 10-2. During the game, Ruth got on base and was able to steal second base off Alexander, and it was the only stolen base the Yankees got in the whole series. It's distinctive because of what happens in the next game, but just sort of keep that in mind that Ruth in Game 6 got a stolen base when Grover Cleveland Alexander was pitching. So we go to a seventh game, and the Yankees pitch Wade Hoyt, and the Cardinals, Hornsby pitches Jesse Haynes. It's a close game. It's another closely pitched game, low scoring game, and the score goes to 3-2, 3-2 going into the bottom of the seventh inning. And remember, we're in Yankee Stadium, and the Yankees load the bases with 2 outs, and Tony Lazzeri coming up to bat. Now, Lazzeri is a rookie, but he finished second in the American League in runs batted in 1926. So he's a dynamic hitter, a forceful hitter. A base hit probably scores 2 runs. An extra base hit might score at least 3 runs. Basically, the series is going to ride on what happens in this particular inning with Lazzeri at bat, Jesse Haynes on the mound. Lazzeri is known to like fastballs, so he steps into the plate. Hornsby, who's playing second base, comes in to talk to Jesse Haynes and asks Jesse Haynes how he's doing. Haynes holds up his hand and shows him that his fingers are bleeding from throwing the knuckleball. And Hornsby says, "Can you pitch to Lazzeri?" And Haynes says, "I can throw the fastball, but not the knuckleball." And Hornsby says, "We don't want any fastballs to Tony Lazzeri." So he takes Haynes out of the game, and he calls to the bullpen. He's got every pitcher available on the staff because this is the bottom of the seventh inning, seventh game of the World Series. Any pitcher that he wants, he can pick. He picks Grover Cleveland Alexander, who had pitched 2 complete games, was probably out drinking the night before. People say that he was asleep in the bullpen. It was kind of a chilly day. He was wrapped up in a red sweater, but he gets the news that he's supposed to come in and pitch to Lazzeri. So this sets up the most famous at bat in Lazzeri's career, and one of the things that Grover Cleveland Alexander over a 25-year career is most known for. Alexander comes in. He was known for not liking to take very many warm-up pitches. We don't know what condition he was in terms of whether or not he was hungover or tired or sleepy or whether or not his arm was tired. He had pitched 2 complete games already in the series. He threw 3 warm-up pitches, threw a ball and then a strike. And then on the next pitch, Lazzeri connected and hit a ball deep to left field, right down the foul line, curved foul. Some players later said it went foul by 6 inches. Others said it was foul by about 6 feet. But it's one of those moments in a baseball game where the fans hold their breath, and the flight of the ball just a little bit off center would have changed the game and changed history. But anyway, the count now was 1 ball and 2 strikes to Lazzeri, and on the next pitch, Alexander threw him a curveball. He swung and missed, struck out, ended the rally, left the bases loaded, and we went to then the top of the 8th. Cardinals did not score. Bottom of the 8th, the Yankees did not score. Alexander retired them 1-2-3. Top of the 9th, again, the Cardinals did not score. Bottom of the 9th, the first 2 batters went out, and then the 3rd batter, the last out that the Yankees had, their last hope to try to get the game even and send it to extra innings, is Babe Ruth. So Ruth is now batting against Alexander in the bottom of the 9th inning. Score is still 3-2. Alexander goes to a full count on Ruth and then walks him. And after he walks him, Ruth doesn't swing at that 6th pitch, which is called ball 4. Alexander comes in and asks the umpire, where was that pitch? And the umpire said it was just outside. And Alexander says to the umpire something to the effect, "I would think that you could give an old guy like me a break and call that a strike." So Alexander now has to deal with a base runner. It's the first base runner he's had to face in this relief role of his. Ruth is on first base. The tying run, which could send the game to extra innings. The batter is then Bob Musel, who had a really good season. He was a power hitter, and on deck was Lou Gehrig. So the Yankees had two really good hitters coming up. Ruth on first base. Alexander pitches to Musel, and on the first pitch, Ruth tries to steal second base. The catcher for the Cardinals, Bob O'Farrell, throws him out. He's out by about 6 feet. There's a famous photograph of Hornsby making the tag on Ruth. And that ends the game. It ends the inning. It ends the series. It's the only series that's ever ended on a failed stolen base. Ruth got up out of the dirt, shook hands with Hornsby, congratulated him, trotted off the field, and that was the end. That was the Cardinals' first World Championship. Ruth, of course, was, despite the fact that he had that 3 home run game and hit another home run in the series, was considered kind of a goat because of the fact that he got thrown out trying to steal on Alexander. And there's been a lot of discussion about that attempt by Ruth, why he did it, and whether or not it made any sense strategically at that time. It's one of those Babe Ruth stories that has kind of resonated through the years, kind of like the called shot in all of us who follow baseball and follow baseball history, wanting to know, what was Ruth thinking? How did that actually happen? It's really a very dramatic and interesting moment, I think. So that ended the series. It was a pivotal, and this is one of the reasons I liked writing about 1926. It was really a pivotal series and moment for both of these teams. It was the first franchise win for the Cardinals. The Yankees already had just one franchise win. But over the next 21 years, 15 times either the Yankees or the Cardinals won the World Series. They became the two dominant teams from 1926 through 1946, winning 15 of those 21 World Series. The Cardinals, of course, prospered in the 1930s with the Gas House Gang. Frankie Frisch and Dizzy Dean and his brother Paul were some of the stars on that team. Leo DeRocher, who had previously played with the Yankees, was on that Gas House Gang team. And of course, for the Yankees, when the Ruth and Gehrig era ended, the DiMaggio era began and carried them on into the late 40s. So I'm going to stop there. I'm happy to talk more about the Negro League Colored World Series, or sort of what was going on in the culture in 1926, because in the book I do talk about things that were happening off the baseball field. There's a short scene with Al Capone. A couple of Yankees had dinner with Al Capone during that season. So let me just stop there and see what questions might be in the chat, and just let everybody else in with an opportunity to talk about that particular World Series or anything that I've had to say about the book.
Okay, guys, anybody have any questions? Either chat or ask out loud. Tom, is the book out?
The book is out. It was officially out September 1, and so it should be available in local bookstores and all the online places that people shop. And of course, it can be bought directly from the University of Nebraska Press.
Got a question there in the chat for you.
Oh, okay. I think I saw, what did American League owners can you put that question back up just for a moment? I didn't see the whole question.
What did the AL owners do about the Dutch Leonard affair?
Oh, yeah, good question. I meant to come back to that. They turned it over to Judge Landis in September, and Landis, first of all, was very angry that he had not been involved from the beginning, that he felt he should have been told back in June that Leonard had these letters and had made this allegation. And there's a long-standing feud, which I won't go into, between Ban Johnson and Judge Landis anyway. So there was tension there. What the American League owners decided was that the information, including the letters, should go to Landis for him to deal with, but that they would tell via Ban Johnson, they would tell Cobb and Speaker that they had to retire from the game because they wanted to completely sort of cover up this event. I mean, the American League owners took the accusation fairly seriously, and were afraid that it was going to damage the game. Cobb and Speaker at first agreed to retire, and in fact, each of them did publicly retire. And this was after the end of the World Series. Then they went on a hunting trip to Wyoming, and they had plenty of time, I'm sure, to talk about what they were going to do when they came back. When they came back, they went directly to Judge Landis, indicated that they thought they were innocent, and wanted Landis to investigate. So the first thing Landis did was to contact Dutch Leonard and tell Leonard, who is now living out in California on this, he had a huge farm in California. He became a very wealthy man after his baseball career ended. He asked Dutch Leonard to come to Chicago so that Judge Landis, could interview him. And Dutch Leonard refused on the grounds that people in Chicago got knocked off. He said Chicago was too dangerous a place. He wouldn't come to Chicago. So Landis actually went on the train to California and interviewed Dutch Leonard to get his side of the story. And then he came back to New York, and in December of 1926, he brought Ty Cobb, Tris Speaker, Smokey Joe Wood into his office to interrogate them, and he invited the press in so that newspapermen and the press heard everything that was said during the questioning that Landis had with those three individuals, all of whom refuted what Dutch Leonard said. They said they did not plan to do anything. They did not fix the game. The letters are incriminating in that it does indicate that they bet on the game, but they all three of them claimed that the conversation that Leonard claimed to have had with him didn't occur. So Landis was kind of stuck in this dilemma. He had this evidence that some betting had occurred. He had Dutch Leonard's allegation that the game was fixed, and he had the testimony from Cobb and Speaker in particular saying the game was not fixed. And of course, as I indicated earlier, neither Cobb nor Speaker did anything during the game to indicate that the game was fixed, or that they were not participating fully as athletes. So basically, Landis exonerated them. He said he didn't approve of players betting on games. And of course, in 1920, which would have been after this game and after the Black Sox scandal, Landis did set rules, very strict rules about players not being allowed to bet on baseball games. It's the rule basically that got Pete Rose kicked out of baseball. So that's the way that was resolved. Dutch Leonard later gave an interview to, I believe, to Damian Runyon, who was a sports writer, saying that he had gotten his revenge. He thought that he had been very badly treated by Cobb, for whom he played, and by Speaker, with whom he played on the Red Sox. But anyway, he thought that he had tainted their reputations, and that was that plus the $20,000 he got for the letters made things even. Other questions or thoughts?
Anybody else? Questions, comments?
Can you hear me, Pete?
Yeah, Tim, go ahead.
Hi, how you guys doing? Well, that was just a fabulous presentation, first of all.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. That was really incredible. Right off the top of your head, I could tell. Yeah,
well, I've been living with this story for 4 years, so
really impressive.
Sorry,
with regards to Babe stealing and getting caught stealing. What theories have you come across on that, and which do you favor, if any?
Most people who were questioned about it later, including the players who were involved in the game, and also Miller Huggins and Hornsby. Hornsby said it's the only time he ever saw Babe Ruth make a mistake in baseball. Hornsby had a very high regard for Ruth as a very intelligent player. Um, Huggins said, "Well, Babe was on his own. If it had worked out, we'd think it was a great thing." He tried to, I think, offer some support for Ruth. Most of the players in that game and most of the sports writers thought that it was really bad a bad move on Ruth's part. But what Ruth said actually makes sense to me. He said the way Alexander was pitching, it was very unlikely the Yankees were going to get back-to-back hits and drive in a run to tie the game because they didn't have anybody in scoring position yet. And what Ruth said was, I stole a base off to him in game 6. I thought he wasn't paying attention to me, so I thought I could get down to second base. So I think
Right.
that Ruth actually had a pretty logical reason for trying to steal, and I mean, he was the third leading base stealer on the Yankees in 1926. He stole 135 bases in his career. I mean, he was not a bad base runner. He was certainly not in his prime in 1926, but he was 31 years old. He wasn't wasn't in the physical condition that he was, say, in the 1930s. So um, my take on it is it was a gamble. It didn't work out, but there's a kind of logic to it. And Alexander, it's true. Alexander had shut the Yankees down in game 2 and in game 6, and was unhittable. It seemed like in his relief appearance in game 7. If Ruth had been successful, he would have either been on second base with Musial, a right-handed hitter at the bat, or Musial, if Hornsby had chosen, could have walked Musial to pitch to Gehrig. And then you'd have a right-handed pitcher pitching to a left-handed batter. But Gehrig was a second-year player, and he was not considered a dynamic hitter yet in his career. So it would have been a very interesting sort of strategic moment for Hornsby if Ruth had been successful.
Well, thank you. Had you ever come across have you ever heard a theory that Bob Musial might have been that Ruth wasn't trusting, didn't believe that Musial could hit? You sort of answered this in a way, but on a different level, you regarding Musial himself, did you ever hear a theory that Ruth didn't believe that Musial was going to get a hit or on base?
Yeah, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that theory. And Musial had gotten, I think it was in game 6, he had gotten an extra base hit off Alexander. So Musial had actually had a little more success with Alexander than the other Yankees. The one theory I did hear, although I couldn't find it confirmed anywhere, is that Ruth thought they had a hit and run on, and Musial took the pitch. He didn't swing at it.
Ah,
So
okay,
yeah,
great. Thanks
but
for
Ruth never said that. And you know, my thinking is, I'm not sure Ruth would have blamed a teammate if that actually had happened. So I
right.
don't know. It makes some sense, I suppose, um, that Huggins
Yeah,
might have put a hit and run on, and Musial
yeah.
missed a sign or didn't swing.
Especially
So
not blame his best friend on the team.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Well, thanks. That's great information. The whole thing was great.
yeah. It's a fascinating little nugget. Just that little event out of you play 300 and some games. The two teams that make it to the World Series, and then you play seven games, 9 innings each, and you come down to one at bat and one play, which basically decides the World Championship.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic presentation. Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
Anybody else? Questions, comments to either Tom or myself?
I'm curious how many people know that story about Ruth being thrown out at second base. Is that kind of a brand new Babe Ruth story, or is that pretty well known to those of you who follow baseball history?
I think Babe Ruth fans, all historians certainly all know it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, most of the public may not though.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I work at the Babe Ruth Museum, so I know a little bit more than the average
right.
Joe. But people
Right.
are surprised to hear that. Um, you hear the home runs, and you hear some people even know about his steals of home, but that one is a
Yeah,
little bit of an oddball.
yeah,
Saber
yeah,
community notwithstanding, because we know more
right,
than the average fan.
right. Yeah, how many steals of home did he have? I remember coming across that, but I don't know the
I
number.
want to say it's 8 or 10.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think 10.
Yeah.
And in some ways that validates his decision to try to steal second base in the game we're talking about. I mean, if he'd been that successful stealing home, um, here he is trying to steal second base off a 39-year-old pitcher who probably was pitching with a hangover. So, maybe it wasn't crazy on Ruth's part to try to get down to second base. And I think we should also give credit to the catcher, Bob O'Farrell, who's not a really well-known catcher on the Cardinals, but he was the National League MVP that year as a defensive catcher. He hit like 260 or 270. I mean, he was not a big hitter, but O'Farrell was a really good defensive catcher. And of course, you think about Ruth taking that lead off first base. As a right-handed hitter, O'Farrell saw Ruth, the whole time, and made apparently a perfect throw to second base. So again, maybe it was just one really good baseball play by the Cardinals rather than a stupid play by Ruth.
Do you get into the epileptic matchup at all? Do you mention between Cleveland Missouri
What about Lazari?
as far as them being epileptic?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's an interesting part of the story. I mean, um, Lazari was picked up and signed by the Yankees out of the Pacific Coast League, and there were three strikes against Lazari that the scouts who went out to scout him noted. One was that he had epilepsy, although he'd never had uh, any kind of condition or fit during a game. Secondly, that his statistics on the Pacific Coast League were inflated because he played a 192 game schedule. He had 60 home runs in 1925, but that was over 192 games. And thirdly, that he was Italian, and at that time in America, Italians were not looked upon favorably. Um, so that it was a stretch for the Yankees to sign him in the first place. But then we have the situation of him batting against Alexander in this famous at bat, the most famous at bat of Lazari's career, and it's a pitcher with epilepsy pitching to a batter with epilepsy. I mean,
Yeah.
that's very odd. And of course, epilepsy at that time was treated as a much more serious condition than it is today. I say in the book, I can't remember the exact number of states, but even into the 1940s, many states did not allow epileptics to marry each other. I mean, there was a tremendous discrimination
Wow.
against people who had epilepsy, and um, Lazari, we think, died in a fall at his home when he might have had been stricken with an episode. People don't know for sure what the cause of death was, but he had a Hall of Fame career, obviously one of the great Yankees. Um, Lazari did tell a story about working in his bar. He owned a bar in San Francisco after his playing days were over, and he said that there was not a single night in his bar when somebody did not come up to him and ask him about that bat against Grover Cleveland Alexander. That he never in his career lived down that single strikeout,
Oh,
even though he had a Hall of Fame career by the
sure.
numbers and by really terrific career. So it does sort of indicate how a single moment in a player's life, stays with him. Think of Bill Buckner, a
Yeah, yeah,
terrific ball player. And what do we think of? We all have an image of that ball going through his legs.
right. And Fred Merkel.
And Fred Merkel, yeah, yeah.
You
All right. Anything else? Anyone?
What's
Going
the,
once?
what's the next best story outside of Yankees, Cardinals, and Dutch Leonard from 1926?
I would say the next best story really is the Negro Leagues and the Colored World Series of 1926. In the Eastern Colored League, it was the Atlantic City Giants who won pennant, and then, as I said, I think earlier, there was a split season in the Negro National League, with the Kansas City Monarchs winning one half, the Chicago American Giants winning the other half. So there was a playoff in the Negro National League to see which team would go to the Colored World Series. That went 5 games, and Willie Foster pitched a shutout. It was the last game was the last part of the series was decided by a 2-game doubleheader. Willie Foster pitched both ends of the doubleheader, winning both ends shutouts. And then in the Colored World Series, Willie Foster pitched the final game, a 1-0 shutout. So for me, the best story outside of the Yankees and the Cardinals is Willie Foster, a 22-year-old who's in the Hall of Fame now. Who pitched for the Chicago American Giants and was the winning pitcher in both the playoff series and in the final game of the Colored World Series.
Great. Thanks.
And Alexander, the whole story of Grover Cleveland Alexander, basically leading the Cardinals to a pennant, and then, winning 2 games and saving one, all in Yankee Stadium. I mean, he's a big story from that season also.
All right. Tom, appreciate it. Look forward to reading it down the line. I got a backlog of books, of course.
I know.
I'm sure we all do. We're in the SABR
We-
world, and
we all do. I've got a big stack next to my bed, so
yeah. So you never get caught up. So
that's true, and they're really good books that keep coming out. So
they just keep, yeah. And then there's the free ones that SABR puts out every couple months, and you're like, oh, come on.
right.
Um,
Well, we can't get enough of them. Those of us that are dedicated to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. So don't forget, everybody, if you have an article, submit it. If you don't, expect the newsletter to be out probably sometime in the next 8 to 10, 12 days. And then we have on October 1st, same bat time channel here, author just talking about his book on the Philadelphia Whiz Kids of 1950, which was my dad's favorite team back in the day.
Yeah,
So,
that should be a good one.
if there's nothing else, I hope everybody has a good evening. Going to look at the seedings and see when the playoffs start. I know who I'm rooting for in the postseason, and it's not any of the big clubs. So I'm wearing my Cubs hat, but if it happens to be the Brewers or some other team that hasn't been there in a long time, I'm good with that. Brewers, Seattle, Padres, whatever. So
yeah, Seattle wouldn't it be great if Seattle wound up in the series?
If Seattle finally won their first pennant, at least.
Yeah, right. Thanks to the last 2 weeks. I mean, they were basically unbeatable at the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm very, very interested. And of course, then we have the award seasons and all that other kind of stuff coming up too. So,
right.
Free agency, it just was announced that Pete Alonso is going to opt out of his Mets contract. So,
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Which is not surprising. So anyway, thank you all for coming. Hope everybody has a good week. Here in Maryland, it's starting to become fall. I took a ride up to Pennsylvania earlier this week to go visit my mom in the Scranton area, and the leaves up that area are already starting to change. So it's that time of year. So, and I already started seeing Christmas ads, but it's a little too
gosh.
Yeah, that the internet is a little bit ahead of itself. So, but appreciate everybody's time. And Tom, good luck.
Thanks for inviting me on. It's always a pleasure to talk to your group.
Now that we're 10-year veterans of SABR, so we can kind of toot our own horn and say we can stand with the best of them. So
yeah.
And so anybody has how to reach me if you guys need anything. So appreciate it, and have a good weekend. And I'm gonna go get a snack before I head to bed. Good night, everybody.
Yep. Thanks a lot. Thank you all.
Guys.
Thank you.